It's the spookiest mic check ever.
He's Ed, he's Todd, and I'm on my best behavior.
And I'm on my period. Todd's crunches. I can see them.
I'm checking the mic, man.
You're crunching the mic, man.
It looks just fine.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Embassy Exclusive. This is a monthly show just for VG Embassy Patreon subscribers of the VG Emissary tier or higher, usually. I'm Ed.
I'm Todd.
And I'm Joe.
And each month we get together and share video game music, the latest news in gaming, and our itchy, tasty opinions on both. This is the Patreon episode for October 2021. We hope you guys enjoy it.
Can something be both itchy and tasty?
If you're a zombie, yes.
I mean, apart from like a scab?
It's an in-joke from Resident Evil 1. Oh, you've never played Resident Evil 1?
Oh, okay. Well then, no.
You guys are staring at me like
The
I've got
answer is
three
no.
heads. Oh my goodness. So what happens is you end up in a bedroom in the mansion, and you see this journal of this scientist who got bit by a zombie, and he's slowly turning into it. And he's talking about how he's like getting itchier, like as the infection is taking over his body, and he started like getting the urge to eat some of the lab animals that he was working with, and it was like, and they were very tasty, and then so his language like devolves each day, and by the end, like the final day, all it's written in like blood-stained letters is itchy, tasty, and that's kind of a Resident Evil joke.
That's awesome then.
So our opinions are both itchy and tasty simultaneously. But getting onto the show, hello, we are doing a special Embassy exclusive this month because we just released our Halloween patron special, chock full of spooky tracks that were submitted by our Patreon patrons, and we're kind of doing the same thing on this show, so I thought it might be cool to release this episode publicly as kind of a companion podcast to the original one. And, also as a, here's what you guys will get if you decide you'd like to join our Patreon at the VG Emissary tier or higher. That's $3 a month or more. And you can go back and listen to 27 additional Embassy exclusives. I think that's more me than I would want to listen to myself, but you might think differently.
That's a lot of Todd.
That's a lot of me.
It's a lot of Joe.
It's a lot of Joe.
It's a lot of us. But anyways, just for those of you who have not listened to Embassy exclusive before, it's a discussion-heavy show. We do play some music, but not nearly as much. Each month, Todd, Joe, and I pick a topic that we'd like to discuss and a song that accompanies it. It doesn't always need to be 100% in line with the topic, but just something to kind of break up the discussions into different chapters. And one topic per month I post in the Patreon exclusive Discord and gather some answers from you guys on the Patreon exclusive lounge and read those on the show, and we kind of discuss those answers as well. So it's a fun little thing, and if you're not a member of the Patreon, you can join up at patreon.com/thevgembassy, and you'll get a good feel for how the show is as we go through it. But anyways, we've got some cool topics today. I know we talked a little bit about Halloween tomfoolery and stuff at the beginning of the VG Embassy that we did together, but usually at the beginning of the show, we kind of do a little catch-up and what games we've been playing, a little mini review of anything that we've found interesting, anything other than what you guys have talked about on the previous show that you guys have been doing this month?
I'm playing Unsighted for the Switch. It is very good. I recommend it to anyone who's into action-adventure, platforming kind of games. It's a fun pixel art style, and I find myself liking the story as I'm playing. It handles real well. I'm only 3 or 4 hours into it, but I'm really digging it so far, so I'm excited to, if not 100% it, just really like get into it and explore everything, and I think it's a great game.
I'm told it's a lot like Crosscode.
It has that feel to it, and it has that art style to it, and you solve puzzles in kind of the same way, although they're nowhere near as hard, which is what's making me like this better than Crosscode.
So why is it called unsighted? Are you blind, or is there some sort of...
It's part of the story. Your character isn't blind, but it has to do with like the falling apart of human society. I haven't gotten the whole answer to it yet, but the unsighted are what they call these what originally started as machines to help humanity that have gone feral and have lost sight of what their job is supposed to be.
Okay.
And they just try to kill you.
So like disillusioned more than unsighted. I see what you mean. Okay.
Although again, I'm only a few hours into it. They might reveal more as it goes. But
Very cool.
That's the sense that I'm getting from it. But
Neat.
it's very fun.
What about you, Todd?
Right now I'm playing Metroid Dread, which I'm very much enjoying. You have probably seen some of my discussions of it in
About
Discord,
getting hopelessly stuck?
about getting stuck and then unstuck. But it's really good and I like it a lot. It is a worthy entry to the Metroid series. Prior to that, I played a little game called Toby, which I mentioned to you in Discord. It is short and maybe not quite as good as Inside and Limbo, but that type of game. I would say, I know you said you were going to put it on your wish list. I would say if you can get it, on a Steam sale for $4 or $5, it's worth that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. You said it was like 3 hours long or something like that.
That's what I put into it. You have to go through all the levels, so it's not like you can skip any of them. I didn't find all of the what are called friends, which are just basically little shadow creatures in cages that you can find. They're like the sort of additional thing that you can do that you don't have to do.
Gotcha.
In order to get through the game.
Mm-hmm.
There's 6 of them. So I didn't find all of those. It would be nice if the sort of you could, once you finish a level, you can go back through it, and find the friends if you want, but you don't. It doesn't tell you which levels the friends are in.
Gotcha.
Do you know what I mean? So it gives you like sort of like an overall
There's no way
map.
like 0 out of 3 friends or 1 out of 3 friends.
Right, in any given level. So I'm not going to go back through the entire game just to look for like the last 5 friends that I didn't find. So I'm not.
Sounds
doing
like
that.
something you need an FAQ for or something. So
Right, and I spent my time with the game. I spent about as much as I would want to. It's good. I'm not sort of playing it up very much, but if you liked Limbo and Inside, you'll probably like this.
Cool.
And I also played Shadow Warrior, the remake, which came out a few years ago, which was originally a DOS era shooter, sort of in the vein of Doom back in those days.
Oh yeah.
Was recently
of course,
remade. Lots of good juvenile humor and stuff like that in this game. It was fun, but
I played through that one too. I haven't played the second one yet though.
Yeah, there is a second one. I have it on my wish list, waiting for a sale, but I'm not going to spend whatever.
It was made by the Duke Nukem guy, so if you're familiar with the Duke Nukem humor, Shadow Warrior is very
similar, right? And
I have such a soft spot for that sort of thing from 20 years ago when I was a teenager.
Well, then if you haven't played Shadow Warrior, I recommend it to you.
Give that one a try.
And that's about it. I am still playing Infra, although everything that isn't Metroid Dread is on hold right now for Metroid Dread.
I figured as much. I was going to ask you about that too, but you are enjoying Infra.
I am enjoying it.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to comparing notes once you're done with that. Myself, oh god, I don't even want to say what I've been playing.
Is it SnowRunners?
To add to my list of extremely boring games that I enjoy the piss out of, I'm almost all the way through a game called House Flipper, in which you.
I saw that you've been playing that.
Yeah. So basically, it's a simple first person kind of game, but you either take jobs or purchase houses, and you go in and the house is just like a mess, and your job is to clean it up, organize the yard, paint the walls, basically get the house looking in tip-top shape. Use a little bit of your creativity, but also incorporate the ideas that your client has to get it done, and you earn money, and as you earn more money, then you can buy full houses and you can renovate them and sell them off for a profit. So it sounds so boring, but it's actually a lot of fun. It's one of those cathartic kind of games that I like playing as much as Truck Sims. So I'm almost all the way through it. It's not a very long game, but it's fun. I mean, it's well done. There's a ton of different customization options. So if you're, into that kind of if you're the kind of person who like played Sims more to design the buildings than to actually interact with the people, like this is a good like first person 3D view version of that Sims creativity kind of stuff. So I didn't expect to get that into it. I actually got it for my wife and Logan to kind of share and play together because she's like the kind of person who really likes doing the house decoration stuff on The Sims. And I was like, I'll give it a try. I'll see what it's about. I'll make sure it's a quality game that they'll enjoy. And I started playing. I'm like,
turns out it's a quality game.
A week later, I'm like, I've been on vacation this week, and I've just been like,
play?
No. Yes.
Wait till I renovate the kitchen.
Exactly. Don't mess up my save file. But having fun with that. Of course, playing more SnowRunner. I got a little bit into Metroid Dread. I just wanted to see what it was like, and I will definitely go back to that. And Mario Party Superstars will be coming out the 29th, 5 days from now. So I plan on playing a lot of that with Logan once it comes out too. So lots of good stuff. Good stuff coming out. So I think that's been my October so far. And I love this time of year because there's so many good games that come out around the Christmas season. It just seems to flood the market all at once. So I'm looking forward to the rest of the stuff that's coming out, and also checking out the what's the name of that game again that you just said? Toby. Yes, gonna check that one out too. All right, so I think it's time to get into our first topic of the show. Todd, you're up first today. What you got for us?
My track is Samus story or theme of Metroid. So in your soundtrack that I downloaded from your little file archive, you have it as Samus story. The YouTube soundtrack has it as theme of Metroid. I'm not sure which one is right.
Well, I named the files. I named the songs after the files that were like in the file system on the game, and I'm sure that the person that put it up on YouTube created their own. So neither one are legitimate. They're just kind of descriptors of what the songs are.
So my track is Samus story or theme of Metroid or something else entirely.
There you go.
From Metroid Dread, released just a few weeks ago on the Switch in 2021, composed by Kenji Yamamoto, Soshi Abe, and Sayako Doi.
All right, and if Nintendo ever releases an official soundtrack to the game, then that will be the obviously official title.
So we will go back and edit this podcast.
Well, at least I'll go back and edit my soundtrack that I have in my collection so the song titles are official. All right, let's hit it.
Welcome back. That was Samus story, possibly theme of Metroid, possibly something else from Metroid Dread, released very recently on the Switch. Composed by Kenji Yamamoto, Soshi Abe, Sayako Doi.
And I think it even says theme of Super Metroid on that YouTube page that you linked to. So
did
three
it?
different names.
So yeah, we don't... Uncertain what it's called, but I'm sure anybody who is a Metroid fan has recognized the song.
You know what it is, people.
You know what it is. Playing Metroid Dread, for those who have played it, you are very broadly being hunted by these sort of machines called the Emmy when you're in certain areas of the game. And it's an unsettling feeling being hunted. Obviously, this is just in a video game, but you're sort of always looking over your shoulder. And that sort of brings me to my topic today, which is, apropos of the season, have you ever been legitimately scared in a video game? I'm not claiming that I'm scared in Metroid, but it is sort of a tense situation when there's this machine that is faster and stronger than you, that is actively seeking you out, and any movement you make will draw them towards you. So what are your guys' experiences with something like that?
I can think of one off the bat, and it's more jump scared than anything else. But after I played through Doom for the first time, like in the early 90s when I was just before high school, I got a hold of a copy of Heretic, also by id Software, using the same engine. I'm going to guess you guys know this game?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Yep. It plays the exact same way as Doom, except it's like fantasy-based rather than space monster.
Right. And if listeners are familiar with Hexen, it's the prequel.
It's the prequel to Hexen.
Right.
Yeah. And I was 12 or 13 at the time, and our old family Pac Bell was in the living room, and I'd wait till everyone else went to sleep and it was perfectly dark out. I'd turn out all the lights. I'd put on a pair of headphones and turn the volume all the way up. I'd turn the music off and just play with the sound effects. And I remember scaring the bejesus out of myself when one of those flying things would come at you the second you turn a corner and just rip you to shreds. And I really dug that kind of thing. And that's I'll say the last time I tried to freak myself out with a video game. But that's more jump scares than the situation or the surroundings or the so I guess a modern equivalent would be like a Five Nights at Freddy's kind of thing, where you're just letting things jump out at you to scare you, in the dark. But it was that kind of thing when I was 12 or 13 that I remember, I'll say, quite fondly and quite vividly.
Yeah, that's cool. I think there's a different feeling between whether you're playing a game knowing that there will be jump scares or scary situations and still getting scared, or a game that kind of you don't expect it to have a scary and then it does. There's a much more visceral reaction, I think. I guess the one that jumped out at me the most when you asked was, and it actually kind of ties into the last episode because you were talking about having started Amnesia. That same development company, Frictional Games, created a game called Soma 2 games after Amnesia, and it's a kind of a science fiction game, and you find yourself transported into the future, into the body of a humanoid robot. And it's very walking simulator-ish. You travel through these areas that are all these underwater bases, and you kind of have to get into submarines in between each one and navigate the sea in between each area. And in some of these areas are these other kind of berserk robots that are kind of wandering around. And so very similar as Amnesia, you have to hide from them. Sometimes sometimes you need to get from one side of the building to the other, and this robot is wandering in the middle, and you need to stealthily get your way through. But the way that they create tension for these areas is incredible, because they take the fact that you're in a robot body to, in Amnesia, you would start to, your heart would start to race, your vision would kind of dim, things would go wavy. It's so much creepier in Soma, though, because it starts to mess with the coding in your brain, so parts of the screen would start to glitch out, and you'll get audio pops, and things would just get really kind of staticky and pixelated, and so it really, you feel like a digital degradation on the screen as you're trying to get through these monsters. And I remember just a couple times it'll get more intense as the monster gets closer to you, but then there's a huge jump, like, from, like, the intensity of it to when the monster actually catches you, and then things just go berserk for, like, 2.3 seconds, and then everything goes white, and then you get, basically sucked back to where you were before. And just sometimes when you don't realize the monster is as close as it is and you get caught, like, the jump is unbelievable because you're really trying to, orient yourself, and it's dark and your vision is all screwy, and they did a really good job at creating tension and fear. So I remember a couple of those instances where I was just like, oh my god, I don't think I can play this. Like, I need to put this away for the next night because I can't do this anymore.
That sounds awesome. I need to play this.
Yeah, Soma's really, really good.
That sounds like my jam. I would really dig that.
Yeah, and if you're in for a really good, like, thought-provoking sci-fi story, and on top of it all, it's great in both of those regards.
Yeah, I guess I need to play more of these games. You mentioning that also reminds me that Amnesia is also on hold to Metroid Dread. I did start playing that, but I haven't played much more since we recorded. I know you're releasing this and the other podcast basically in tandem, but we recorded the other one about a week ago. So most of that week has been spent playing Metroid and not Amnesia, Infra, or other things.
Yeah, I'll be releasing them in order. So I think we're recording this on Sunday the 24th. So I'm going to release the VG Embassy show tomorrow on the 25th. And then this show will come out at the end of the week, probably like the 28th or the 29th. Something like that.
Okay, so about the same time frame anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Just so our conversations have they go in order anyways.
Right.
Yeah, there are, I'd honestly be interested to hear some of our folks on Discord and Twitter. Have there been any situations where you've been legitimately scared in a video game? I'm sure there's a ton of them out there, but it would be fun to have those conversations, right before Halloween rolls around. All right, I think we're ready for Joe's track. What you got for us, sir?
All right, my track is called Flesh and Bones. It's from Thrill Kill, which was a planned PS1 release for October 1998. It never was actually released. Composed by, as near as I can tell, Contagion.
Yeah, Contagion is Keith Arem.
Thank you, sir.
Anytime.
This is why we keep you around, Ed.
Of course.
And we're back. That was Flesh and Bones from Thrill Kill, a planned PS1 release from October 1998, composed by Keith Arem, aka Contagion. So, my topic for today, pretty apropos of the song, is gore, blood, and guts in video games. Obviously, when we were kids, this was something that got talked about in the media all the time because when Doom came out and Mortal Kombat came out and Street Fighter to a lesser extent came out, it was all about how shocked and afraid parents were that their kids were going to turn into serial killers by playing Mortal Kombat, basically. And by today's standards, it's got to be considered tame. It's pixelated. It's not really that over the top, compared with everything that's come after, I'd say. So my question then, when does blood and guts work in a game? What makes it good? What makes it not good? What makes it too much? What makes it too little? And primarily, what do you think it would take to push the envelope nowadays? If it was something like Mortal Kombat 25 years ago, what would have to be in a game today to make parents and the government and, everyone else as a society talk about how awful it is and try to get it banned?
I don't know that there necessarily would be a way to push the envelope such that that kind of reaction would take place. I mean, there's some pretty violent games out there these days, and it doesn't really seem to faze anybody anymore. We all, as Joe mentioned, we all lived through the late 90s and early 2000s when violence in video games was a hot topic, like a political debate. Is it harming our kids and stuff like that? And of course, we as the kids that were playing the games never thought. So, but obviously there was a lot of debate on whether or not, firing a gun at another person in a video game was somehow mentally harming the person or teaching them to do, unsavory things, whether or not that was something we should be regulating video games on.
Right.
Now that it's become more, normalized or just more prevalent, video games in society, I don't know that there's necessarily a line that you can cross. Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know. I think, well, for one, I think being geographically located where we are, we had like a front row seat to this whole Mortal Kombat thing because Senator Joe Lieberman was the guy at the helm of all of this video game violence, and he was a Connecticut senator. So every time you turned on the local news, it was like, what's Joe doing now? And he had rallies around this stuff. And so as a video game fanatic, as a kid, I think I was like, high school, college age around then. It got really... I took a lot of it personally. Like, I felt like I was being attacked a lot. I remember my girlfriend was a year ahead of me in college at Albertus Magnus, and he was the keynote speaker at the graduation. So, and it was like right in the middle of his whole, I think this was 1999, 98, 99, something like that. And so a large part of his speech to like the graduating class like incorporated his whole war on video games, and I'm like, just shut up. But anyways,
that's maybe not the place to take that stand.
Yeah. Aside from my misgivings about the man, I don't know. I think there are kids that are affected by it, and I think there are kids that are not. I think the kids that are affected by it already have a predilection towards it anyways, and will have attached themselves to violence in any form of media, whether it's comic books, movies, games, TV shows, etc. And hiding them from that violence is not going to solve anything. It's just going to make them crave it more. So, as adults and parents, the job is to identify those kids that are unable to separate fake violence from real life violence and give them the guidance necessary, And there are kids like me that grew up with this stuff, and I'm consider myself a real life pacifist, but I don't mind violence in video games at all. It doesn't affect me.
I hit a limit recently for me. In the older, I'll say, pixelated era games, like Doom and Mortal Kombat, that never bothered me, and I was also of the age where I kind of wanted to see that thing because it was bad and you weren't supposed to see it. And that just made it fun and exciting for me, and I don't think I turned into much of a sociopath, at least not a violent one anyway, as a result.
Just a regular sociopath.
Yeah.
I think we already determined this on last,
Yeah, we
show.
discussed
so.
As previously discussed. But for me, I played GTA 5 a couple of years ago, and I was looking for a big open world game that I could get into, and I know that everyone loves that game. But I got, I'll say, an hour into it, and it was just a little too much for me. I wasn't offended. I just didn't enjoy it. The language and the blood and guts and it just didn't do anything for me. I was like, yeah, maybe I'm just getting too old for this kind of thing. But then soon after that, I ended up playing Blasphemous for Switch, which is a Super Nintendo style pixel art game, which is very like bloody and gory, and that it didn't bother me in that context at all. But I think when they made it ultra realistic, like GTA 5 was trying to do, I don't know, it just didn't do anything for me.
Okay, I mean, yeah, there's a point where it's like, for me, if I determine a game is just violent for the sake of violence without much context or gameplay behind it, then yeah, I mean, I'm going to notice it more, and I'm probably going to be, it's going to be more like an annoyance, like this is all just for shock value rather than, but being a big fan of the Grand Theft Auto games, I know what I'm getting into when I buy one, I guess. Yes, it is gratuitous in places, but I feel like the gameplay is worth being a little offended in places by those games. I'm trying to think about pushing the envelope, and I think like hypersexual violence would push the envelope. It's not, you don't see a lot of that in video games. Not that I'm want it at all. And especially for the internet nowadays, like graphic slaughter of innocent animals. Like everybody's really all up on, can I pet the dog? Does any harm come to any of the animals in the game? Like, people can slaughter each other all they want, but when it comes to animals, people are like, no, not the animals. So I think that would get a lot of people really upset if there was, something like that beyond like the Deer Hunter games, where again, if you're, buying it, you know what you're getting yourself into. But there's not a lot of envelopes left to push, I think, and that might be a problem for sure.
Little side note, Shadow Warrior actually addressed what you were just talking about with the animals.
Right.
Sometimes when you're wandering around in the levels, you'll sort of see like a grassy sort of field or something, and there'll be bunnies kind of hopping around, and sometimes they hump, which is part of the juvenile humor that I was talking about. But you can kill them. You can't pet them or like be nice to them. You can either leave them alone or you can kill them. And I don't know if it's random or if you just do it enough, but if you kill enough rabbits, and don't ask me how I know this, if you kill enough rabbits, one of them will sort of resurrect in a murderous rage and come after you and try to kill you. And there's actually
like the chickens in Zelda.
Like the chickens in Zelda, but you can actually defeat them. Don't ask me how I know that. But I found that a little bit amusing.
Bunny killer.
Yeah.
I don't know if I ever even tried to kill the bunnies, so I don't think I ever knew that when I was playing that game. So thanks for ruining my childhood.
You're welcome. Well, I'm talking about the re-release one that I'm playing.
I know,
now,
it was just a figure of speech. But,
okay.
But ultimately,
ruining my early
your innocence,
40s.
yeah.
Ultimately, Ed, I suspect you're correct. So the sound, the track that I played from Thrill Kill, that was a game that was planned to be released for the PS1 in 1998. But as we were discussing as the song was playing, the company that was going to put it out was purchased just before the game was released, and it was decided that for its violence and blood and gore factor, it would be shelved indefinitely. And I don't think that could happen today. At least I don't see that happening today. Even in a day where people are, I'll say, concerned about cancel culture or that sort of thing, I don't see a video game being too violent or too gory to get released. I could see it getting released and then maybe, there being a little outrage over it, but I don't see anything ever not getting released.
Yeah, or at least I think with the internet, again, the internet influencing a lot of video game media, that if a game were to have a lot of press or that looked really good and then got canceled, there would be a lot of backlash about it. Whereas with Thrill Kill, the late 90s, early 2000s, most of our video game information was coming from magazines. So we read in a magazine that Thrill Kill's been canceled. That thing's already happened like a month and a half ago by the time that the magazine finally got into our hands. So what are you going to do about it? You're going to go on random bulletin board somewhere, not affiliated with any game organization, and kind of complain about it. But there was no direct line to these executives or developers that you could really voice your opinions to. So what happens. But I think now, I think now you're right, and I'm kind of agreeing with you in that people would not be canceling games like this because they're aware that the backlash would be immediate, because the news would be immediate. So
it would almost be worse for the company to not release it at that point in terms of the press.
And I always thought, like, Thrill Kill was not that big of a deal. Like, the fatalities were not anywhere near as gory as Mortal Kombat's were. And the characters were like a little BDSM, like there's a midget in bondage gear on stilts, and like a dominatrix woman. It's like nothing that we really haven't seen before in other video games, even before or after this.
True. Yeah, you were playing a little bit of video while we were listening to the track, and I had never seen the game before, and the violence in it
It's pretty tame.
Really strike me, even at the time. For the time, didn't really seem to me as over the top.
There are some, like, some of the women have, like, sexual moves where they'll, like, you know, grind her crotch into your face and then, like, slam you to the ground or something like that. But that could easily be edited out if they actually wanted to put the game out.
That could probably have been taken out if that was what was...
Yeah. So what they ended up doing was they canned this game and then reused the engine for that Wu-Tang 4-player fighting game. It's basically based on the Thrill Kill engine. So they didn't scrap the whole project. They just retooled it for black violence instead of, you know, BDSM violence, so whatever. And I guess that's more acceptable, right?
And as you taught us, the soundtrack ended up coming out anyway in a different form.
Exactly, yeah. The composer Keith Arem has an industrial band called Contagion, and his album Infectant contains many of the songs originally written for Thrill Kill, with lyrics and remixes and stuff, and rearrangements of the song. So pretty cool.
Before we move on to the responses from our listeners, one thing that and I don't know if anybody, I haven't read any of the responses, so I don't know if anybody mentioned this, but one of the most amusing to me reactions to violence and blood and gore in video games has always been Nintendo's, certainly around in the earlier times when they would do things like replace blood with sweat in Mortal Kombat and
green ooze
or anything like that. Recently, I've occasionally, not seriously, but like I'll throw in the Super Nintendo port of Wolfenstein, which is terrible in a lot of ways, but it is following at Nintendo's refusal for anything red in video games for the time.
Yeah,
and all of the soldiers, or the rats, not dogs, rats, that you fire invisible projectiles at.
Rats are more acceptable than dogs.
They sweat instead of bleed.
It's pretty stressful.
Then,
sweaty German rats.
And then just fall over. If you're not actually shooting them, then you can't be killing them, right? So they're not sleeping, but they're otherwise incapacitated.
They're stressed out by the bang of the gun.
Yeah, right.
They're trained to just fall over and play dead.
Right. So it's kind of a weird, amusing throwback to that time when Nintendo was so against that, but they weren't fooling anybody. Like when Mortal Kombat comes out and you punch a guy in the face and sweat comes off, you know that's not what that's supposed to be.
Exactly.
So I wasn't angry with Nintendo at that thing at the time, but I was always just kind of baffled as to why they bothered, because it's not really different. The sweat being gray or whatever it is not that different from being red. That like.
It's not going to cause a different reaction in the player.
Right, exactly. So, I don't know. I just wanted to throw that in there.
Oh, I totally agree. All right, so now we're going to move on to a segment that we call Patron Answers. We're still workshopping that.
That's very creative.
Yes. Anyways, so this is where I ask one of the topics questions to our friends in the Discord lounge on our Discord channel for the VG Embassy, and read their answers and discuss them on the show. So our first response was from Ryan Steele, and he says, Blood and Guts to me has to be over the top and unrealistic. Games like Doom, Gears of War, and Killing Floor have extreme violence that is over the top in a fun way instead of like a gross way. Games that push the envelope Games that push the envelope like Manhunt, where the premise was to push the envelope with extreme violence, but at least you were taking out bad guys. Games where you commit violence against civilians is where things get a little out of hand. I have similar feelings about Grand Theft Auto, where you're just a bad person doing bad things to random people, or in the story missions where you do bad things to bad people. I wasn't allowed to play Resident Evil 4, and so when I bought it myself as a teen, I had a lot of fun. My older brother, 11 years, is really into horror, and when I used to go to his house when I was 12, I used to play and watch all the things I wasn't allowed to do at home. I guess he's 11 years older, is what he meant. That's where I played Resident Evil Remake on the GameCube for the first time and absolutely loved it. I learned about most of the horror genre games when I was in college and missed that phase. I think my first horror game was Splatterhouse, which I played on the Wii Shop after learning that my parents threw away our TurboGrafx 16 when my brother was younger, and it was because of Splatterhouse. It brings me back to that terrible twin-stick shooter game called Hatred that was all about the shock value of mass killing. Yeah, Hatred is a good example of violence for the sake of violence. That was basically about, you're a guy who's just sick of life and you want to commit suicide by cop. So you basically run out into your neighborhood and start shooting random innocent people and just go through buildings and corporations and stuff and just shoot as many people as you can without getting killed by the cops that show up.
Wasn't Postal like that too? I remember there was a big...
Postal was weird. It was more just like a miscreant simulator, more or less. But yes, you can kill innocent people, but there was more of a mission-based thing, but again, it was way more of a violence for the sake of violence and a shock value style game. So not as evil as Hatred was, but still more like shock value in a different sense.
I think to combine the what we're talking about here with Todd's earlier comment about Nintendo watering things down for basically no reason, I'm reminded of Carmageddon for the N64.
Such a good game.
Well,
not the N64 version, but
which
not the Nintendo port, weirdly enough,
was a great game, but the N64 port watered it down completely, so it didn't look like you were just running down civilians. I think
that's right.
They changed it to zombies,
right?
So that that made it okay.
Of course.
Well, who doesn't like killing zombies?
But I'm in agreement, I think, with Ryan Steele that when it becomes you're randomly killing civilians or people who aren't bad guys, that makes it seem worse.
I think those games, like Grand Theft Auto, gives you agency, though. You don't have to kill those people. You can drive around safely and not hit pedestrians. The game doesn't make you kill innocents.
Same with Carmageddon.
So the game might be a little bit more difficult trying to avoid all the innocents, but you still have that presence of mind that says, if I want to bring my own personal morality into this game, I can. Or I can just say to myself, it doesn't really mean anything if I hit somebody. I'm not going to hell because of it. So, games that force you to do those things, like Hatred, where the whole point of the game is to kill as many innocent people as possible, that's where I would draw the line myself.
I also agree with Ryan about the blood and guts needs to be over the top and unrealistic. That sort of adds an illegitimacy to it that, it's there. It reminds me of that game on Wii, with Greg Proops, you know what I'm talking about. Mad World, yeah. Where it's really just like a cage match thing, and the blood and guts and violence is over the top, but that doesn't.
Right, the game was in black and white, so that the red blood stood out.
So that the red blood stands out, right, and that just makes it over the top. So obviously, there's no psychological harm.
Yeah.
Next up, Alex the Messenger says, my parents used to be really strict about video games until I was about 14, so I didn't play too many gory games until the last 10 years. As much as I didn't get along with my dad, I think he had enough respect for me to know that I wasn't going to be poisoned by whatever it was that I was consuming game-wise. In terms of pushing the envelope, I think violence in gaming has already hit its peak.
Wow. You can always go higher.
Yeah,
I don't think there's ever going.
There's always going to be, more graphic, more sexualized, more realistic.
Or even beyond realistic, it could just be like in Mortal Kombat when 8 hearts come out of you. But you could do that in a 3D photorealistic sense where you have more blood and guts than you would normally have, just for, visualization's sake.
Someone will always find a way to amp it up more. The original Doom thought to be this incredibly violent and bloody game. When they remade Doom more recently, you can take a chainsaw and cut the demons up, and
pull the hearts out and shove it
blood
in their
and gore flying everywhere, and it's it takes it up to a level beyond what the original Doom was, and that's obviously what it was trying to do.
Right.
Somebody's always going to figure out a way to step it up another notch.
kind of reminds me of when I was a kid. My mom was very anti-violent, so we never got to play games with guns in them when I was a kid. We weren't allowed to watch G.I. Joe. We weren't allowed to do a lot of this stuff, which, again, we were like, why? It doesn't really... When we got older and they didn't care, we got the violent games and we played them. Like, I don't feel like we would have been any different personality-wise had we been able to play Contra as a kid or, versus when I was 12. So, but again, maybe they were just being cautious and making sure that we weren't those kids that were going to be affected by violence in a negative way. So, we just ended up not being. So, next up is...
Bedroth, who says... I don't recall not being able to play any particular video games. I wasn't super interested in horror games or anything more violent than Doom, which even my parents saw as cartoonish, and since the demons were the bad guys, they were okay with it despite the fact that we were churchgoers.
Gotta blast away hell, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still not, really. In a time when things like Invincible and the Boys seem to be pretty mainstream, I feel like you have to either go really hard to push the envelope, or you'd have to do something morally questionable like politically or religiously motivated torture in a game. I don't feel like the violence itself would be envelope pushing anymore. You have to get to the motive behind the violence. Yeah, I agree. I mean, you just mentioned the overly sexualized violence that we haven't really seen, and not that we should, but that sort of plays to this.
Yeah.
He continues, as far as when violence works in a game, it's easy for that to spiral into whether or not violence works, period. Of course, there is going to be violence in our media because there is violence in nature, and art imitates life. Good point. I think violence in a game works best when it's either incidental to the story and utterly cartoonish, that is, non-visceral, as it is in games like Mario, Sonic, Kirby, or when it's used intentionally by the game's creator to make you question the use of violence at all, Fable, Undertale, or games I could mention with little research, but it's already getting long-winded. I'm generally a pretty extreme pacifist, and I'm pretty sensitive to gun violence, so PvP and human-on-human war games don't work for me these days, even cartoonish ones like Fortnite and Overwatch. Same with hunting games and violent crime games like GTA series. Hand-to-hand violence doesn't tend to bother me as much. Beat 'em ups and fighting games, combat sports games are fine. And again, the level of unrealism will affect how I feel in this regard.
That's a really good point, where he's talking about hand-to-hand games and stuff, because I feel like the ability for your opponent to inflict violence, or the ability for your victim to inflict violence upon you, is probably a very good barometer for people's violent tolerance too. Whereas if you're in Grand Theft Auto, you've got a gun and you're running around shooting innocent people who can't fight back, that's going to be considered to be way more violent than two people trying to punch each other with equal martial arts skills. Even though the amount of blood might be the same, or the amount of gore might be the same, if both people are there for the violence, it's quote-unquote more acceptable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
It's interesting that he both didn't have any limitations on his games, but still ended up with those kind of anti-violent sentiments. And it's funny that he mentions stuff like Invincible and The Boys,
which I'm not even familiar with.
Well, they're
great shows.
Yeah, they're shows. They're not games.
Oh, well, shows you how unfamiliar with it I am.
Yeah, Invincible is a like a superhero, like realistic
cartoon.
It's for
series.
adults cartoon series. Yeah. And The Boys is another superhero, kind of very realistic. It's like if GTA had superheroes in it, kind of a thing, I guess is the best way to explain it.
As an aside, has anyone seen the YouTube video where Omega Man takes on, what's the name of the guy from The Boys? Homelander. There's a 4-way battle. It's Homelander, Omega Man, and two other, like, similarly, Superman is the third, and the fourth one is, I forget. It's some other invincible character from pop culture. If you haven't seen it, go onto YouTube and type in like Battle Royale with Superman, Omega Man, and you'll see it. It's really funny.
Oh, that sounds cool. Maybe we can watch that after we finish recording.
Yeah,
it'll be fun. Yeah, but anyways, yeah, those are shows where, I don't know. I find some of the violence to be justified in those shows, and I find some of the violence in those shows to be kind of extreme and shocking. There's just one particular scene in Invincible, Joe, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Where it's like, it's absurd, but it's for a reason, and I don't think it would be as poignant without the amount of violence in that
one scene. Yeah.
But I don't want to spoil it. We can talk about it on the Discord or whatever if other people have seen Invincible and want to talk about it. But thank you, Bedroth. Those were some really good opinions and good points to make. Obviously, again, the more cartoony the violence, the less people consider it violent as well, because it's not as realistic. All right, moving on to our last patron response. Kung Fu Carlito chimes in, and he says, growing up loving fighting games, violence has almost always been a part of my gaming experience. The two games I think of are, of course, Mortal Kombat, but also Samurai Showdown. In the old Mortal Kombat games, the violence was over the top, but even as a kid, I could see the humor in it. Those digitized graphics made things seem surreal. I'd love to see like 5 rib cages explode from one person. Yeah, so exactly what I was talking about. Now, in the newer games, the characters are modeled so fully, I feel the violence does go a bit too far. Some of those fatalities are pretty brutal to see. I think of Noob Saibot's Mortal Kombat 9 fatality, where he straight up tears the opponent apart vertically. Yikes, to which Alex the Messenger replied, I can stomach intense violence, but that Noob Saibot fatality is hard to watch. Kung Fu Carlito continues, all the bones and organs are modeled, and the cartoonish quality is gone. It's nuts. My favorite violence in games is the older Samurai Showdown games. The violence replicated the dramatic clashes you would see in many of the old samurai films I love. Seeing a dramatic slash followed by a spray of blood to finish the round was super cool. They even would add blood-covered sprites for the winner during their wind pose. Pretty great stuff, haha. Yeah, I never really considered Samurai Showdown to be that violent, and those blood splatters don't happen very often either, but they are fun when they do. It's just like an arterial spray, and then the character just collapses. It's like, it's not, too bad.
I haven't seen the fatalities from MK9. I feel like I want to watch a video of that now just so I can gauge my own reaction to it.
Mortal Kombat started with like 8 and up to the current one. The fatalities have been super realistic, and they've even got these like super moves where like you would hit a person with excessive force and it will like briefly zoom in and go X-ray, and you'll see like their jawbone like crunch or their spine crack, and then it'll just go back out and you continue fighting again. So it puts these flashes of extreme violence in between the gameplay, so you're not just sitting there and witnessing it and then the match ends. So it's a little bit different take on making violence part of your gameplay instead of just like a cinematic at the end of the game.
Mortal Kombat always amused me. Like you have these fatalities, and you would, as an observer, you would see two characters fighting. One would, rip their spinal cord out as a fatality or something. I don't know. I don't really follow the game, but do something horrible to them, and then the next round starts and everybody's fine.
Everybody's fine. It's all good. And that's the same way with the newer games, because the newer games, the single player modes have like these big cinematic cutscenes in between each. It's like watching a movie with fighting scenes in between each one. And there are times where you can do a fatality on your enemy and like rip them to shreds, and then the cutscene starts and they're intact, no blood on them at all.
Right.
They're just staggering along because they've just been beaten. But it's really funny to just see all that violence just get wiped away clean and continue on with the story mode. I anticipated a response like this from Carlito simply because he is a huge fan of martial arts movies, and so violence is part and parcel to the entertainment that he enjoys. So, but it's cool that he made that connection with Samurai Showdown and the move. Like I'm not a huge samurai movie fan or martial arts movie fan, so I didn't realize that particular brand of violence in Samurai Showdown was an homage to the kinds of things that you would see in a samurai flick. So that's a cool little throwback. All right, so thank you to all of our patrons that responded. There's a lot of cool responses. Definitely some new points that we hadn't made in our discussion, and it's fun to see people's varying levels of violence tolerance and what makes them go squeamish and what doesn't. Todd doesn't even get squeamish shooting bunnies in the face, so I guess we know who's the real sociopath.
Or slicing them up with the samurai sword, which is also an option.
Unbelievable.
Oh, man.
You're off the show. All right, so
Probably for the best.
let's move on to the final segment of our show with my next track. We're going to be listening to Remodeling from Silent Hill 4 on the PS2, composed by Akira Yamaoka.
Ooh, good choice.
All right, we're back. That was Remodeling from Silent Hill 4, released on the PS2, composed by Akira Yamaoka. Figured like going out on a very noisy, kind of a very scary sounding track would be appropriate for this show. Neither of you guys, we were kind of talking, neither of you guys have played any of the Silent Hill games?
I've played the Silent Hill games. I haven't played Silent Hill 4.
Oh, okay. So, my topic is based on this story, and I didn't want to say what the topic was because I didn't want to give away the story, but so I played this game right after it came out, and I was living in an apartment, and I had this gigantic living room, and wanted to really get the full Silent Hill 4 experience because I loved the first 3 games so much. So I would play it late at night. My wife was at work, and it was dark outside. I would have all the lights off. All I would have was a desk lamp next to me, and I printed out a playthrough from GameFAQs just in case I got stuck. And I didn't even want to like go over to the computer and turn the screen on. I wanted it as dark as possible. So I'm sitting there, and I'm playing through the game over the course of like several nights, kind of doing it the same way each time. And I get to the end towards the end of the game, where you're basically the apartment that you're locked in is part of this big apartment building. And when you finally get free reign to kind of wander around this huge apartment complex right before the end of the game, you know, there's little jump scares and the music changes and there's sound effects, and I'm getting through this level and there's this like baby crying that I'm hearing, and everywhere I go, like it seems to like always be like from the same speaker and at the same level, and I'm trying to figure out like if it's one of those sound effect things where it's like there's a baby crying but it's just for the sound effect and there's no actual place you have to get to, or if it was trying to lead me somewhere. So I'm wandering around. I could not find it, so I'm just like playing, and the crying is like really getting to me. I finally like get to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm too shaken up by it, like I can't deal with this anymore. So I pause the game, the audio stops, the crying keeps going, and I'm like, wait a second, this is not coming from me. I realized that to the like behind the TV and to my right was Eddie's bedroom, and he's been crying for like 20 minutes in his crib. He was a little baby at the time. I was like, holy shit, like but for that like 15 seconds where I couldn't figure out why the sound was still going, like really, really freaked me out. So of course I got up and I went to soothe him, and he was like all out of sorts because he'd been crying for so long. But it was just like this weird melding of scary video game and scary like real life scenario. I guess my question is more like a vague, like, have video games ever bled into real life for you like that? Or have you ever been in a situation where you might not normally have been like scared or tense, but it reminded you of a tense moment in a video game that kind of affected you in that way?
For scary things, not so much, but I remember this was probably a couple years ago now. My topic in one of these shows was that question exactly, like, when do you know it's time to put down a game? And I remember using the example when I was deep in Horizon Zero Dawn.
Right.
And for anyone who hasn't heard that
right,
episode,
you were addicted to that.
I had it bad. And in Horizon Zero Dawn,
in the morning gaming
the rareness of an item is shown by what color it is. You know, most things are like green or blue or red, but if you see something purple, it's super rare. And I was playing it, and it was fall, and I went outside and I was raking some leaves, and I looked down, and there it was, a perfect purple leaf. And without thinking, I knelt down, I picked it up, and I almost put it into my pocket until I said, wait a minute, I don't need a leaf. And
this is not legendary.
And I threw it away and continued on with my day. And that's when I took a break from Horizon Zero Dawn. So it wasn't in a scary sense, but I'll never forget that minute, just kneeling on the ground, holding it in my hand, triumphant that I had found this legendary item that surely must be extremely valuable, before realizing it was a leaf.
Where would you even sell that? Just put it on eBay, like a rare legendary leaf.
Oh, no. All merchants will give you something for it.
Oh, that's fair. You just walk in your local, like,
merchant
McDonald's, just be like, here, I'll pay for a Big Mac with my leaf.
I expect change, sir. A lot of it. There's only one of these.
Any instances for you, Todd? You seem to be...
I'm trying to come up with... I mean, you know, we've all sort of had... You've seen sort of memes on the internet where, like, there's a ray of light coming down, like, on a cat, and the
oh yeah, or the brick wall that's like a little more wrinkled than the rest of the brick wall,
and it's like,
can I bomb through there?
I've played this game before. This cat has a side quest for me, or something like that. I feel like I've had an experience like that before in real life, but I can't come up with it, so I don't really have a story that I can share.
Well, if you remember, come back to my house, just knock on my door, 3 a.m.
3 a.m. and
set up your microphones, Ed.
Set up your microphones.
I gotta tell you guys something.
I got something. I have had the experience. Are you guys familiar with geocaching?
Yes.
Yeah.
But you might want to explain a little bit of it. So
geocaching is sort of the gamification of like going out and hiking in the woods, or not necessarily, but the idea is that you go for a hike in the woods, and you bring along with you a GPS, like a handheld GPS receiver, and in tandem with a website, geocaching.com, I believe it is, or .org.
How original.
Whatever it is. You can put coordinates into your GPS, handheld GPS, and go out into the woods and find things that are hidden in the woods that other people have hidden there. It's sort of the gamification of leaving the house.
Yeah.
And doing
it's like a
something
metal box
outside.
with trinkets in it, or a note.
Yeah, there's usually just
like
and there's a log that you can sign to prove that you found it and stuff like that. And if you've done it long enough, which my wife and I have done it for several years now, you start to see patterns in how people who hide caches hide them, either covering them with sticks laying in a certain way, or like in like a rotted out hollow of a tree or
Natural
something like that.
Or something.
Right, like you sort of see the same hiding places over and over, and as that you develop what some people call like a geocacher's sense or intuition or something like that. So I constantly like see places in the world where I'm like, there are pretty good chance there's a geocache in there. Probably not. It's just like one of those places that
just matches that description.
That right, I would expect to find one. That's as close as I can come. Just thinking about it for a few minutes.
Now, if you're ever
Something
walking
like
through the woods and you hear a baby crying,
that's a different thing entirely. Then I'm calling the police.
Or a priest or something, depending on the type of crying. Yeah, that's interesting. Nothing like that has ever happened to me before or after that, and it was just this weird. Because if I hadn't been playing that game, like if I was playing, I don't know, I keep using Contra, but if I was playing Contra and a baby was crying, I'd be like, oh, that's Eddie crying. I gotta go get him. But just because it happened to be a sound that I would have been expecting in a spooky game, I just never made that. Those two neurons just never connected in my brain that, hey, maybe it's your kid, idiot.
Maybe it's an actual baby actually crying.
So, yeah, that was my Halloween spooky video game story, and I got to play some Silent Hill music along with it, so I can't really complain about that.
Any excuse.
Exactly. Well, I'd like to thank all of our patrons for chiming in with our patron answer segment, and I had a lot of fun. This was cool. It was a nice little compliment to the VG Embassy show. As always, anybody listening for the first time, we hope that you guys enjoyed the show. You can head over to patreon.com/thevgembassy if you'd like to hear more. Sign up for the VG Emissary tier or higher, and you'll have access to all of our previous Embassy exclusive shows, and of course all of the future ones. We record once a month, and we try our best to get it out once a month, as long as COVID's not going to prevent us, or nobody is sick or just unable to. I don't think we've missed any months except for that year and a half where we were all kind of quarantined and it wasn't safe to gather to do this. So there's a lot of content there, and there will be a lot of content going forward. I'd like to thank Jason Letourneau for our Embassy exclusive theme song that you hear at the beginning of the show, and as usual, all of our Patreon patrons. At our tourist level, Cameron Childs, Daryl Bowers, Last Rican, Dan Lawton, aka The Phantomeyer, and Bedroth from the Very Good Music VGM podcast. Our VG Emissary tier, Chris Murray, Chris Myers, Chris Steenerson. I've got a lot of Chris's who are on our VG Emissary tier. Mike Stark, aka Ganon11, Jordan Worma, Kyle Kroll, and the Dyad. Our audio attaché members, Cameron Worma, Carlito from the Heroes 3 podcast, Scott McElhone, and our special agent tier, Ryan Steele and Volt Supreme. Lastly, but not leastly, our VG Ambassador tier, Frankly Zappa, who we'll be hearing from very shortly on an episode of the VG Embassy, and the patron saint of VGM podcasts, Alex, the Messenger. All right, so next show will be November, and maybe we should, pick music from songs with turkeys in them. Maybe not.
How about Untitled Goose Game? I can talk about that.
Ooh, yeah, maybe just birds.
Not quite a turkey,
Random
but
birds.
All right, bird games.
Angry Birds, Untitled Goose Game, etc., etc.
Is there any more besides that?
Stay tuned and find out.
Probably one of those hunting games, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Duck hunt.
A Short Hike. You star as a bird in that game.
Oh yeah, that's right. That was a great game.
Stay tuned, folks.
All right, guys. So
We'll make sense of this.
we will see you next month for another episode of Embassy Exclusive. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Later.